This conference will now be recorded.
And so welcome today to everybody's session of the FSPA Branch Transformation Committee. I'm going to keep you muted during the program. If you have any desire to speak, just use the chat box and I'll unmute you. We did pick on Dan Kremens today for his expertise in security, video, data analytics, and all that. And so that's the topic for today. If you have any questions, just join in. We are recording this session and I will have it up on the FSPA website probably Monday or Tuesday. So keep an eye for it there. It's under a tab called webinars. It's not behind a login if you want to share this with other members of your company. So, and with that, I'll turn it over to Dan.
Yeah, thanks, BJ. So you're seeing a slide here, so don't fear. This is just one of 5 slides, including this slide. So it's really, I just put together a few things to just use for discussion points. And BJ had some questions she came up with. That'll be a great topic. So if we could use that as the driving force of the discussion. So to start, there's really 3 questions to frame this whole discussion on. And I think that they're great topics. And I kind of was staring at them yesterday and this morning, kind of thinking about it, and I have views, but that's why we have the committee to talk about these things. So the first one, how has branch transformation changed security in the branch? And I'll tell you my views, and then I definitely welcome the other members to join in here. But I was kind of thinking about, a bank branch, how it's changed in, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, et cetera. And, back then, you'd put security cameras watching all the key points. I mean, obviously, anywhere there's a transaction, so that's at the teller, the ATM, the drive-through. You put them around the facility to watch parking lots, et cetera. So pretty basic stuff. So I was thinking about, in branch transformation, what has actually changed? And I was trying to go through my head, so I said, well, there's still tellers, there might be less of them. There's ATMs, there might be more ATMs, now they're ITMs at the drive-throughs. So the one thing that I thought about from a security standpoint, there used to be a lot of cash drawers for the tellers, and now that those cash drawers are going away and being replaced by cash recyclers. So I was thinking that was one thing that branch transformation has changed. And I'm just, I'm not the expert on the cash recyclers, all the other people on the phone are. And maybe that's a good place to start, is what security has to go in place for cash recyclers versus having cash drawers that tellers would use. So that was my first idea to bring up for discussion.
Well, Dan, that is a good point, but I really think it's not really about cash recyclers or anything like that. Is what do we see going on in the branches where they're going to pods? And there was always that central focus of the teller line. Now that focus is not there anymore, or it's being mitigated. And Nick and I were actually having that discussion earlier this week. And it's just the changes in the flow and the way people are moving around the branch versus based upon a cash recycler, an ITM, an ATM, or anything like that. It's just the way that we see the transformation of customers' paths throughout the location. And how do you cover that with security? How do you handle that now so there's so many more points of focus versus just the teller line or just that cash drawer? Nick probably has a lot of history in there and can expand upon that a lot better than I.
Well, maybe only because I've made a lot more mistakes along the way, Joey. But
we all do.
Yeah, the cash recycler is it's a choreography, and it's going to be unique for each customer that you're having conversations with. So I mean, I kind of throw it back to Dan in terms of the security side. What are you seeing with regards to the cameras, and how are you starting to see the heat map affected by automation inside the branch?
Yeah, well, I was going to touch on that in the next two questions because that definitely applies as one example. Um, I interpret this question as, you know, what what changes has branch transformation done on a bank branch, and how has security responded to that? That's why I was interpreting this question. So that's why I was thinking in my head, what was what has changed physically, mostly in a bank branch? I mean, the point you brought up as well. I mean, you're right. I mean, the people flow has changed because you went in and you went right to the teller line. And now a lot of people, like you said, are going to other places. You know, they're going to the ATMs. So that is one area. From a security standpoint, I mean, it's typically cameras everywhere. But I was thinking, like in my head, what piece of hardware has changed a lot, and is there any extra security around there needed? That's why I was focusing on the cash recyclers.
Well,
So
Adam, I mean, from where you sit, I'm sure you have a lot of implementations right now where you're seeing different branch designs. You're starting to see we're seeing new builds, we're seeing new renovations with existing facilities. From the form follows function conversation, Adam, how is security and the facility and the TCR evolving from some of your implementations?
Yeah, when I think about implementing cash recyclers, that type of technology, and how does that impact security, it impacts it in a couple of different buckets. One, there's the part of internal theft, right? So that is greatly reduced, I think, when you think about how that impacts internal theft and security, because you've got things that, got money that's not exposed. Um, Now, can things still happen? Yes, but it's less likely to have it in a temptation. They're not actually counting $30,000 at the end of the day in their hand. They're counting a lot less money. The other piece that's impacted it around risk management, policy and procedure, security, is the changes in how you handle a duress situation. So in a duress situation without automation, you typically would have a die pack, a silent alarm, some type of trigger button to send off a silent alarm in the middle of a robbery. You've got die packs or GPS tracking devices that you would try to hand out. With the elimination of a lot of money in the cash drawer, we're seeing a lot less. You're still seeing those types of tracking devices when you have a recycler, but it's a lot less common in every single drawer that you would have that. And then you've got to figure out the implications of what do you do in the case of a robbery when you have a recycler. Is there a way to do a dispense under duress to satisfy immediate demands? And I think most of the solutions out there today have some type of duress dispense functionality for those, and whether they can trigger a silent alarm once that happens or whether it doesn't. Those are the things that I think about when it comes to security. The other thing and this is maybe another question, but we can cover it, is I've always just said in sales environments, hey, having a cash recycler is a great deterrent. I don't know if that's honest and can be validated objectively with facts. Dan, that would be a really curious question. If you have access to, countrywide data around security incidents, what does the impact of having this type of technology do to the likelihood of having a security risk from a robbery?
Yeah, that's a great point. I don't, but that's certainly something to investigate. And I just want to go back to something you said before. It kind of made me think about a little bit more about policies. So my understanding in the cases where there are cash draws, at the end of the day, the teller has to go back and count the cash, and usually someone else has to be in the room with them. What's the policy with a cash recycler? Is it something similar at the end of the day?
Well, I mean, you don't have to validate that the money that's in there is accurate. The machine's going to give you those totals. The teller themselves is going to have a small amount of cash, maybe coin, rolled coin, mutilated cash. So instead of having, $10,000 to $20,000 in their individual cash drawer, they may have, $700, $1,500 in those other non-recycled notes categories, and they would just need to balance that. So there's just a lot less exposed cash.
Okay. That
And
seems like a common theme.
Dan, we try to expand the conversation other than just cash recyclers and the inherent security things that those are going to bring you. But we start talking about things and become more of a consultant to some degree, where you talk about, okay, for you, branch transformation is putting pods in the branch. What does that look like for you? Because there's no physical barrier anymore. What do I have to do with my procedures first and foremost if a device jams or something like that? Do I dispense all the money? Do I fix my problem now? Do I wait till 5 o'clock? What type of locks do I put on my pod environment? Because you have the inherent possibility of just walking away with that customer and y'all go sit over there on a couch somewhere. Do I need to have the teller or the universal banker sit there and take out keys and lock every one of the drawers where there may have been possible, as Adam was saying, a smaller amount of cash in a drawer? They don't need a lot because of the recycler, but there may be a small amount. So you have to start thinking about, do I buy a pod that has locks that self-close, that self-lock when you close them and you need a key to open them, because people, if they're like me, they're forgetful, and you just get up and you walk away from your workspace, leave your PC unlocked or whatever that happens to be. In their case, it's money, but you have to start thinking about these types of things with security, and then the way that the branch is evolving to those pod environments, those non-enforceable areas like a teller line or things like that. So you start considering all of these possibilities, and then it leads into various conversations, depends on with the customer, because what is their version of branch transformation? So it could lead into a lot of different places. And also it could add things on the security side, such as different buttons, different camera angles, different positions, things like this. Or how do I tie my camera feed into my transactions with my system so I have a little bit better, tighter control over what I'm actually monitoring and when?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. You could go into a existing bank where they have everything set up from a security standpoint, cameras, et cetera, and now they do the various things you're talking about, that there's retrofits. So really there should be something in the checklist that someone else go back and say, okay, we just changed the environment and the process of how this bank branch is going to work. Now we need to go back and just rethink the security standpoint. And you're right, maybe we do have to adjust some camera angles, or maybe add cameras, or maybe we don't need a camera here. So I think that's a great point, Joey.
Or change procedures.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, go ahead, Nick.
So just point of information, just bringing some information into the conversation. I got this email from our friends over at ARCA. This was published a few months ago, but it doesn't specifically answer Adam's direct question about the reduction in security with recyclers. However, I thought this was an interesting tidbit that there were over 1,900 robberies in 2021, and 93% occurred in a branch. And most of those were committed on a Friday, and they had approximately 482 million in losses as a result due to theft. So now, again, it doesn't answer Adam's direct question, but I would think that the obvious answer here is that with the TCR, that's going to limit your exposure with regards to, 1,964 robberies is a lot more than I thought it would have been. I wouldn't have thought it would have been that high. So anyway, I just thought I'd share that tidbit of information for the team, just something to think about.
I think that cash recyclers adds to the equation. Also, training your customers to get up and meet whomever comes to that door and lay eyes upon them, that deters more than we'll ever know. I was actually down in Florida. We were rolling out cash recyclers, and come to find out, some guy came in the door. The bank met him at the door and said, "Hi, how are you doing? How may I assist you?" And had that one-to-one conversation with them. Come to find out, he said, "Oh, I'm just in the wrong place." Turned around and walked out, walked down the street and robbed the bank down the street.
Whoa.
And they only knew that because right after that, they go around and they get the camera footage from all the various locations around that. And sure enough, the guy had walked in there 5 minutes before he robbed the bank down the street. There just happened to be, they met him at the door. They put those eyes on him. He looked around a little bit and left.
Dang. That's
No,
amazing. I
it
love
is
that
kind
story.
of crazy. It's kind of crazy to think that we're walking into banks with masks on, right? I mean, what happened to the world, right? I mean,
That's a good one, BJ. That's awesome. All right, that was great feedback, everybody. All right, I'm going to go to the next topic. So, what advances in video surveillance have changed the way you use video? So, again, I'm going to tell you my answer. I had a very clear answer, but let me say it simple like this. So, here's a chart from Omdia, if you ever heard of them. They're basically a globally recognized market research firm. They cover security, they cover a lot of things, but you'll see this everywhere. The security major mega trend in video is the use of AI and deep learning. So that is the latest terminology that people are using instead of video analytics, but it is video analytics, but it's more than that. But the bottom line is that this has exploded everywhere, not just in the banking place, in the retail, everywhere. I can tell you absolutely for a fact it has within my world of March Networks, from anyone I know in the industry. So I would just tell you to start, okay? That if you are not working with, doesn't have to be March or any other vendors of the video that you're using, if you're not working with them to bring and demonstrate the latest video analytics into, a bank branch or a customer, I guarantee you someone else is. All right, we've had stories of other startup video analytics companies that just going after banks. Some of them are leaving a camera with embedded analytics with their business card. They're just leaving it in the bank branch saying, "Call me." So it is very real out there. And the other reason is that these actually work. So in the old days, and trust me, I've watched this industry grow up. It started off with video analytics, and you had indoor video motion detection, and it worked really well. And so I said, all right, let's try it outdoors. And then you had problems with all the wind that leaves the animals, and this, it doesn't work. And then 9/11 came, and then there was a kind of a renewed interest in this with facial recognition. So it picked up again, but facial recognition really didn't work. But people kept at it, and behind the scenes, people started into this world of artificial intelligence and deep learning and data modeling. And again, just I think I covered this in one of the other sessions. Think of it this way. There are these algorithms that companies create, and the simple example, if I want to basically train an algorithm to identify a pen, then I'm going to feed my machine learning algorithm 1,000 different images of a pen, and then it's automatically going to learn what a pen is. Now, most of the applications of video analytics are not using a pen, but they are using people, they're using cars, they're using colors. So once you identify a person, a car, a face, a license plate, then you develop applications around that. So I mentioned facial recognition, and this has been a really interesting topic because in different parts of the world, and I track it, there's bans, even the United States is part in bans, but there's an application of facial analytics which is actually becoming more mainstream. And I'm hearing interest from the banks, and that's using facial recognition as an access control credential. So, and if you think about it, it's all kind of this concept about, we talk about a cashless environment or a contactless environment. So get away from an access control, getting away from cards. So using biometrics. So it's starting with employees, because that's what you call an opt-in environment. So facial recognition, they say, well, from a privacy concern, I don't want to give you my face. But if you're an employee and the bank says, listen, we're implementing facial recognition so you can get into the bank vault, into the doors, that is starting to happen. So that is one example. There's still a lot of concerns about facial recognition, but I can tell you absolutely that facial recognition being used as an access control credential is very real. So that's one example, but I'll open it up to anyone that has maybe some other stories of what they're seeing. But from my view, this is very real. And if you're not demonstrating things to customers, I guarantee you your competitor is. So any thoughts from anyone on this? I have other examples I could go through.
Well, I think it is becoming more commonplace, as you were saying, Dan. I mean, how many of us log on to our phone with our face, or log on to our PC with our face or our fingerprint? And so we're all getting a little bit more comfortable with the solution. And you know, I'm from an age of where we don't trust anybody or anything with anything. But yes, I'm using my face to log on to my phone and my fingerprint to log on to my PC and other things like that. So it's just a matter of comfort, and I believe that that's getting more widely accepted.
Yeah, absolutely it is.
Dan, what do you think out there? Like when if you were to pick like your top 5 analytics that people are really trying to tune into, what are you seeing out there?
So on the video analytics side, it's definitely within a bank branch. It's more towards the non-security applications of identifying where the people are, where they're spending time. I mean, you mentioned heat maps, Nick, so that definitely comes up. And heat maps are interesting because you can show someone a heat map and it's the blobs of color and it looks really cool, but really you want another level of information on that, because you want to know the direction of where people are going. You want to know how long. So we've broken it down to terms like a dwell time. So there's a difference between walking through a space and staying in a space. Now why does anyone care? I'll tell you why they care. From a marketing standpoint, and this is another entity, it's not a security entity, but it's another entity in the bank branch. They basically come up with these marketing programs, a new loan or something, and honestly, they're trying to see if anyone's paying attention to it. So if you're in charge of marketing, you came up with this, and you have 10 branches, 100 branches, etc., how are you going to know? I mean, now you have the metrics if someone's doing the loan or not, but how do you know if this was actually, you know, viewed or cared by the customer in the bank branch? There's no way of knowing it, right? So if you have the way of identifying the space where that marketing is and identifying if someone's doing that, then you do have a way of knowing it, and that's where video analytics can come into play. And that's just one example. The other one is Q-line, and that's a tricky one. We've worked with a number of different banking customers out there, and it's probably the biggest problem is in the large banks in the cities that have actually real long queue lines. It's because video analytics, if there's a straight line, that makes sense. If there's a line with a curve, but if it's a serpentine line, some analytics aren't equipped for that. So you got to be careful of that. So really the one way that we've addressed it is a lot of the banks we're seeing are not really using, you know, like lines. Okay, they're basically they're watching the general area in front of the teller, and they're trying to do like a general people count. So if the people count is, you know, small, okay, or medium or large, you keep track of that, and then you use that to determine how many tellers you need. So now you're basically using video analytics for another application to help with workforce optimization. You can say, all right, I'm going to do a trend, and it seems like in the morning, we really don't have any people. All right? So in the afternoon, we have more people. So maybe that means I'll just really have one teller in the morning and I'll have more tellers in the afternoon. So again, they're using the data from video analytics in a non-security way.
Yeah, I think the more you're able to use data for multiple purposes, the more value it has, clearly. So you've got, can you use this security data or security product to help you with staffing? It helps you extend the return on investment of that product, as well as use existing technology to repurpose for additional gains and benefits. So I mean, that's definitely smart. I think there's a lot of ways to improve efficiencies, and this is exactly one of them. So and it I would imagine, and I don't know how much this would cost, but I would imagine it's not drastically more expensive because it's more of a software analytics tool as opposed to an capital expenditure into hardware.
Yeah, there's different options. So like this chart is basically showing, in terms of where the technology is. You could either do it on a camera, you could do a recorder. There's definitely a third way you could do it, which is kind of cloud-based. That is a very viable solution as well. So it depends. So if you want to use your existing cameras and the image quality is good enough, you could go to a recorder-based or cloud-based solution. In the case of if you have like an analog camera, it's a great reason to switch from analog camera to a network camera and add some analytics there. So it's a great opportunity to upsell your customer, but there are a few different ways to do it. Yeah, so, all right. If there's nothing else, Adam, what you described is a great segue to the third question, which is this one. So how does data analytics and AI support FX change, customer interactions, and how work gets done in the branch? So I'm just going to use this image I use as a backdrop, and this is something that we use at March just to describe all the things that go around in a bank branch. But there's a key thing in that question there that it talked about data analytics as opposed to just video analytics. So now you think about in a bank branch, and we touched on some of this before, all the data that is created, not just the video, but all the other data that's created. And then I'm going to start with some examples. So the one obvious one that March has done for quite some time is tying together transactional data with video. And the main point of that is just to identify that moment in time when you want to actually look at video where there could be something suspicious going on, as a suspicious transaction that was at the teller, the ATM, etc. So we use that for years. We still use it big on the retail side, but we track the transactions to identify certain unique transactions or KPIs that the bank set up to then identify the video that you want to see. So I have other examples to go about data analytics based on some applications, but just before I go on those, any thoughts from the team about transactions and suspicion around those and fraudulent activity about the behavior that drives in a bank branch?
Well, you can always go back to it and look and see exactly what happened by time, date, stamps, things like that. But we have other customers that are using it to try to figure out problems and issues that happen. It's just not around security. They're actually looking at cameras that have the kind of detail where they can see the cash coming out of the recycler. or the ATM or the ITM, and they're trying to figure out because there was a balancing problem or something like that, or they need to understand what an employee had done or not done that caused them to be out of balance. So yes, security is the main draw for it, but there are other uses that a lot of folks are being done, and it helps fill in the stories. People like Adam, people like myself, when they see a transaction in our software happening, something happening with the machine, and then we can see the person interacting with them, you'd be amazed at the detail and the clarity that that brings to resolving the issue, whatever it was.
Yeah, that's a great point, Joey. So in all the equipment, like we talked about the cash recyclers, but I mean, again, the ATMs, the ITMs, there must be some level of activity reports where all this data is being created. And I imagine some of these other systems have options where you can start seeing trends over time to determine how this equipment is being used, how it needs to be serviced, how it needs to be replaced. So is that happening in the other parts of the equipment used in the bank branches?
Yeah, I mean, there is a little bit of tying. I know, like with the software products out there, we're tying our logs in with the machine logs and things like that. The video component has not crept into that side of it yet to give them an all-encompassing log view of it, or at least it has it from my understanding right now. But using the video aspects of it to help recreate, because a lot of times we'll get a call from a customer and we're trying to piece together the parts, and they're telling you one side of the story. You've got the logs from this machine, this software, and then you throw the video analytics on top of it, and you can start getting that full level detail of understanding, okay, yeah, they say they didn't do this, but I just saw them do that caused this problem, and it linked to this reason for them being out of balance. So we can come back and tell them the whole story with a lot more data analytics behind the story that we're telling with them. And it helps resolve the issues a lot quicker, especially when we have that video understanding, because a lot of times we'll see on the video, the machine said it was doing this at the time when the teller was doing that. And so it just helps broaden that story.
Yeah, that's a good one. So I just thought of another example just listening to you. So I know a number of our banking customers have basically tied in any time that the ATM is being serviced by a technician, that actually is logged as an event in the video system, and that video is stored. So if someone had to go back and just be able to step through every time someone was going servicing the ATM for whatever reason, they can easily go through and look at the video clip associated with that. And again, that's the event. It uses that moment in time where I actually want to record the video, make sure it's there, and maybe I'm even going to audit it at different times.
Yeah, having those cues in there in a log file on video, where we don't have to sit through hours of dead logs or dead video and get to the main point of where we are. If you can have those visual cues or those markers within that log, it is a great benefit to people trying to help with an issue, whether it's a security issue or just a hardware software issue.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I can tell you some other examples where there are other groups within the bank, real estate, et cetera, fraud, risk, that they're using the video system and they use it for audits. So again, they're working with the physical security team, and there are certain situations that they want to audit and keep records of. So they're basically getting either single video images of it or video clips, and they're just periodically going through and reviewing it from time to time, because again, they're one person. They can't go out to all the bank branches individually. So people are using the video to help them do the jobs, but they're not watching video 24 hours a day. They only want to see what they want to see.
Hey Dan, has it gotten to the point where in a financial I think you were talking about fraud earlier, right? As opposed to robbery incidents. From a fraud perspective, if I'm a known bad guy, a known con artist, um, is there any way to if my face walks into a financial institution for me to either be flagged or understand how many times has this person been into this bank before? That's the kind of thing I'm thinking about from a fraud prevention. It's not a whole bunch of people out there that are doing it, but there are some people that are doing it habitually.
You are absolutely right. So the non-video analytic way to do what you described is you create like a watch list, and you basically have pictures on the wall of, hey, if this guy walks into the bank branch, call the police or don't service them. But going back to facial recognition can do that today. It is doing today. Surprisingly, I haven't heard of it being widely used in banks. The area I have heard it being used in the last 2 years is in supermarkets. So in supermarkets, I confirm this. I went to a retail conference a year ago, and they actually presented it, and they are actively using facial recognition to identify some shoplifters. And they even have a written procedure about it that if this person comes back in, the manager or someone else basically kind of follows the person around and says, "Hi, how you doing today? Can I help you?" And they just keep watching him, and they're trying to do it to, dissuade the person from basically going in and stealing. So anyway, it's absolutely, technology is absolutely there. Again, I think that it just has to overcome some negativity on the facial recognition side of some privacy. But I can tell you in the United States, supermarkets are absolutely using it. I know, for example, I'll name one. I think ShopRite is one example that I know they're using in at least 100 locations.
Wow.
Yeah. And by the way, that's not a Marsh Network solution. But I'm not sure whose solution but they're using. But yeah, he showed it to me on his cell phone once. It was actually pretty cool.
It seems to me the casinos started this, didn't they? Looking for the card counters and people. Seems to me
Yes.
going back, I heard even in the Vegas airport and at the entrances to the casino, there was a lot of money involved in that, and it kind of jump started the effort for that. We do
Yeah.
have a comment from Mark. It just popped up and went away. Hold on a second.
Yeah, I saw the comment. So can you connect to an FBI database? So I've heard the answer, yes. I've heard that now, getting a hold of that. Um, I've actually a few times at the As and GS shows, I've stopped by the FBI booth, and I've talked to individuals, and no one, knows the answer, or maybe they do know the answer, don't want to help me. But there are other databases out there. If you think about it, everyone has a driver's license. So that data is absolutely available. And I think once it goes into more mainstream, it's a great tool to use. So I want to give another example of data that's starting to hear about. So I'm getting more involved in learning more about building automation, smart buildings, and there's other technology that is in a branch, um, HVAC, lighting. But if you think about security, for example, the data that these other systems create also can be used. So the one example that we're starting to explore is identifying when the light level drops in, say, an ATM vestibule at night. So when that occurs, that can create a security issue. It can create a perception issue for the bank, because if the ATM is dark, I'm not going to walk in there. So that's another example of tapping into data and then tying it together with video or other things in the right way to produce an application.
This seems to lead to the idea that, again, I've been out of the branch bank sales effort for a very long time, but when you tried to sell video, you were talking to the security department. And now it seems, and they never had any money. I mean, they just never had any money because you're going back, 20 years ago. But it seems now that you've got applications that affect marketing, HR, right? There's a lot more benefit being derived from these applications. When you go and you're talking in a branch on the sales effort and you're doing video and you pull them in, it just seems like that sales effort, it might get a little bit more complicated, but there's more departments being, getting a huge benefit from this than just cameras that used to record to a video recorder. Man, if you wanted anything out of that, you sat for hours. I mean, it was
Yeah.
it was no analytics at all.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, BJ. I'll give you another example. There's a bank that we're starting to talk to now. It's been really interesting conversation because the head of physical security is now the head of the real estate in all of the bank branches, and their major focus and what they're being driven for is ESG initiatives. If you don't know what that is, it's environmental, social, and governance, and it involves some energy savings. So that's the main driver. So again, we're talking about how to tie in some of the data from those energy systems into the other data. And, simple example, in the commercial space right now, there's a lot of activity in using access control and video data to determine how many people in the facility, to then use that as a metric to then change the energy. So if you don't have a lot of people in the building, you basically, maybe I'm going to turn the lights down a little bit, maybe I'm going to change the airflow. So that is becoming a big stick in the industry right now, the commercial side, and it's starting to flow into other areas. Like again, this is the first time we had it. It was a conversation I had 3 weeks ago with one of our banking customers, and again, the person is now in real estate, and they started asking us all these other questions.
Wow.
It would seem like if you could socialize around outside of just bank security video and say, okay, with this type of data, you can do this, or you can do that. With that type of data, it's amazing the interest that it'll draw in the various components, retail ops, all of these other sticky factors that you want with these various groups. And so how can I utilize that data, or just put that thought in their top of mind with them, and let them start coming, well, hey, can you release your security video for me to do this or for me to do that? That would be an amazing conversation to get the extra spend. As BJ said, the security folks are tight, which they are, but how can you get more value out of it other than just waiting on a robbery to happen?
Yeah, but
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, Joey, I mean, to that point, like, can we afford not to have this discussion, right? Is this a discussion we can afford to pass on? Is that ethical? And when I say we, I'm talking about we as in this group of people on this phone call, all of us collectively having conversations with our customers about best practices and branch automation and quality customer journeys. Is this the type of conversation, though, that we can skip? And I don't think that the answer is, I don't think that anyone inside of any institution is going to want to skip this conversation. They may skip the TCR conversation because they're not ready for it, but I don't think this is a conversation that they can afford not to have.
Yeah.
And so the question that I always kind of ask in my mind is, can we afford to not have this conversation? And what are those costs if we don't have this conversation? What are the true risks to the institution, both reputational risk and fraud, financial risk, and then on top of that, regulatory risks that we face as a result of not dealing with this conversation and asking these questions from time to time. I think that those institutions that are not willing to have the humility to have a deep kind of a dive into the the security, both physical and cyber, by the way. This goes on to a whole other conversation. These are real conversations that need to take place right now. And I may be just talking to hear myself talk, but I feel like if we switch the conversation on our customers and have them explain back to us, what are some risks here to your institution if we don't talk about this?
I think that's a great point. And, maybe one idea is, we all have the relationships mostly with the security team, but ask them to introduce just one other department and get them the conversation and hear them out and bring up the points that both Joey and Nick brought up, and just just get the introduction and ask them what problems that they're trying to solve. And if there's a way that video or data in general, anything can help that, I think there's going to be. But typically, and honestly, this would help them do their jobs better. I'm talking about the physical security people who are fighting to get budget every year, right? And we know that affects everyone on this call. So what we're doing is we're helping them to get the budget, and then that indirectly helps all of us, because theoretically they're gonna buy more equipment from us. But the physical security people need help.
Marketing always has more money than security, right? I mean, it's just.
Well, we just got to get people playing the what if game. What if I can do this, what if? And starting to understand what that what if means to them. Put around brackets around that conversation. Can I better understand that I need to move people from my teller line to my drive-through because of this and what video analytics is teaching me here? Or do I need to put that person at the front door to be that concierge because of people just walking in, looking around, not seeing what they're wanting and walking out without interacting with them? Can I learn that? How can I get those sticky factors with all of my customer base?
Great point. All right, any other feedback from anyone on the team?
So I wanted to share, like some of the real life examples of product development that I have worked on with the banking vertical. So I think there's a lot of confusion, like when we throw AI, ML, deep learning, a lot of the people, like I come across, there's a lot of confusion out there. Okay, I mean, AI is a catchphrase for everything. In fact, so what I was trying to say is that the projects that I have seen working, I have worked on, is they are looking for cameras, like that can replace your height strip, like cameras that would automatically track how long the person is, what's the height of the person, or what's the, like your skin tone and stuff like that through a database that ties back to, as someone said, like can we run it through FBI, or if there is a, like top list of, guys who do frequent robberies, and like the moment the guy comes in, like the facial recognition recognizes that guy. Or if you're, like top a guy, like who's your top 10 customer walks in, like you get an alarm that, okay, like this guy needs special service. So I think these are the things the banks are looking for, to have smart cameras with use of some kind of AI or data management. And that's the feedback I wanted to give to this team, what I have seen or what's happening.
Yeah, that's great, Raj. Thank you. I mean, you talked about height strips. So there's two things that though. So you see height strip cameras, right, where there's a height strip and then there's a camera in it. And then I've seen just height strips without a camera, where the camera is pointing that direction. And probably most people know this, but if you don't, the purpose of that is if something happens and this bank robbery or whatever, someone's committing fraud, and they're trying to identify the person, create a description of the person, they're using the height strip, okay, the image of it to see, all right, the person is as tall as the green, so he's about 6 foot. So it's about a 6 foot tall person. So they're using that they're using the video, okay, and get that data to create a description of the person that they're trying to track.
Correct. And also another application that I distinctly remember, and this might be obsolete, uh, that in the cash vault, like they used to put bands on different currency notes. I don't know if still that a practice, but they wanted to figure out, like how many of those red bands were created or how many of the yellow and green. And with the recyclers, I mean, this might be not a problem to solve anymore, but I mean, if it is, like if someone can tell me, I mean, I'll appreciate that.
Don't know.
Okay.
Don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for the feedback, Raj. Okay. Any other points that anyone wants to bring up?
I was just always thinking of it too from an HR perspective, that you can kind of keep an eye on the staffing and how long people are there. And I still go back to something you brought up, Dan, in one of our early sessions about don't study the bad branch, right? Study the good branch.
Absolutely.
And set up your benchmark based on the length of time that they're at the teller station and how long they're in the branch and how long before they're greeted and all that kind of stuff. And we always look at the worst case, but it's the best case, and set up your analytics and your analysis of the rest of the branches based on your best performing branches. And that keeps coming back to me as this being another example where you could, when you're doing an evaluation of the branch and the performance of the branch, bringing this into it could be huge, because no matter what they say, the facts are there and they can't hide behind excuses anymore, because you can look and see exactly what happened.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Again, thank you for remembering that. So I can tell you a few times I met with customers, and it's always when we're walking in, we're the security, and like you said, we're the people come up with solutions to find the bad guy. But when you turn the conversation around and say, listen, have you ever thought about using the same system to identify when things are going good? I mean, we have one retail customer, and I actually met the head of HR, and she told me that they were using video to basically identify when people were doing good jobs, and they were using the video clips for training. So they were using that, for totally different purpose. And then plus, they would use that video to reward the employee, so that they would feel really good about it. So it was just an amazing conversation I had about how she was using, video for a good purpose versus finding the traditional bad guy.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like a really powerful training tool, HR reward, or even if you have to do disciplinary action, again, they can make all excuses in the world, but here's what happens when a teller is really good at what they're doing and engages with the customers, and here's what's happening at your teller station, here's the training we need to do, here's your new goals for the next 3 weeks, and then we can review it again and take another look at the change in behavior. Boy, you never had that before. I don't know if there's an acceptance of that, as that's seems like intrusive monitoring at work, but it certainly seems like an incredibly powerful tool.
Yeah, I mean, I think every bank employee knows that they're being video recorded. I mean, because the cameras are there, so it's probably a condition of the job.
Yeah. Wow. Glad I don't have a camera pointed at me all day. Just saying.
Well, technically, we all do right now.
You got to think about it.
Right. Okay.
That's the big brother's house.
That's it. So does anybody else that's on this have any questions or comments or anything? We're coming up on an hour. Any thoughts?
Dan, I love these conversations. Thank you for kind of talking about this today, because I just think this is like the foundation for being able to better understand branch operations, branch security, branch marketing. It's just a great conversation. I'm glad you led it today.
Yeah, I think it's just these conversations and all the other ones we're doing at the FSPA Branch Transformation Committee, just it's a good opportunity to just step back for a second and look at the world from a wider picture to figure out how, you know, to do things a little bit better for our customers.
And I want to thank all of you on this team for the effort and the time that goes into this and presenting this information for the members. This is just, you know, and again, we've got all these videos up on the website, so there's kind of this school you can go to and start at the beginning and work through it. And there's just an incredible amount of information and experience and ideas in here. So thank you to this team, because it's a bit of effort, and I really, really appreciate it on behalf of the members. So thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Dan, and thanks everyone. Appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Everyone, take care.
Recorded, it'll be
All right,
up on
well.
the website in a few days. So thank you, everybody.
Take care.
Take care.
Thanks a lot.
Have a great
Thank
day.
you.
Bye.
You too.
Thank
Bye
you.
now.